Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
Yo, welcome to another edition of the Coach Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Whitwer. On today's episode, I speak with a good friend, Matthew Walrath. Matt came out of the CrossFit world and he built a really cool nutrition coaching company called Beyond Macros. One special piece about this company was he built it in a way that supported his lifestyle. He ended up becoming a digital nomad, and then he bought a van and didn't live in it down by the river, but drove around the United States and lived a nomadic lifestyle, all while growing and supporting his company. We definitely get into van life and what that's all about, but we also get into what he did right and maybe some of the things he would have done differently in building his company. So if you're into business, this is definitely an episode you're going to want to listen to. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with the Mr. Matthew Walrath.
Matthew Walrath, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Yeah, it's finally heading towards summer here in Australia.
That's the complete opposite of what I got going on. So it's like 29 degrees out, and we're starting to see the 10-day forecast looks like winter, basically now. We've been spoiled through the fall, but now it's winter. And this is the first time I've done an interview with someone in Australia. So like the time zones are like crazy. So you're on Friday, I'm on Thursday. It's like 8 o'clock at night here. It's like 1 in the afternoon there. It's just wild.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. By the way, dude, I didn't tell you, but I've been wanting to get where you are this time of year. Most people probably aren't, flying to the Great Lakes region, but man, there's actually been amazing waves in the Great Lakes.
Yeah, so Lake Superior, like you get your dry suit out and rock and roll, because I think they were saying like 6 to 8 foot swells or something like that. For normally, like the Great Lakes are just like, it's like really, really chill. But yeah, hey man, if you ever get in the area, let me know. I'll come up and watch. I'm not quite to that level yet, but we'll see. So we'll get into all of this, but like Australia, right? So you're an American living in Australia, right? Like what ultimately took you to Australia? Was it the surfing? Was it a girl? Like what brought you there?
Yeah, funny enough, it was Ninja Warrior training. So I'd been training with a bunch of people who were on American Ninja Warrior when I was living in Los Angeles. And I decided to just travel the world for a little bit. You know, my nutrition coaching business was cruising along nicely and everything was online and just allowed me to kind of live that digital nomad lifestyle. And I was in the good old digital nomad mecca of Bali. And one of my buddies was like, "Oh, dude, there's a Ninja Warrior competition in Perth, Australia. It's only like a 3.5 hour flight from Bali." He's like, "You should go over there and do it." And I was like, "Sweet." And so I did. And I was like, "Oh, my visa's 90 days in Australia? Sweet. I'm just going to stay here for 90 days and try to see as much as I can." And on that trip, I ended up meeting my now wife. So, originally came here for Ninja Warrior, stayed for the Sheila.
and left with a marriage. So that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of alluded to it a little bit, the nutrition coaching business. And I think we'll get into that. And some people may know you too with the Beyond Macros, where you're doing the nutrition, where you're actually coaching the coaches. But let's kind of rewind way back into like, how did you even get into this space? You know, where it was like health and fitness, something you were really into right at the beginning and then went to university for it? Or how was what was your path to getting into this space?
Yeah, man, I think there's a lot of things that kind of had me naturally gravitate towards nutrition. And I had quite a bit of a roundabout path. I think but the thing that ultimately led me into it as a career was in college, I was taking a funny sounding minor, complementary and alternative medicine. And we learned a lot about holistic health in there. And it just fascinated me. It originally started with one class. It was like Eastern concepts of health and healing. And I was like, this is amazing. And I just started taking every class that teacher taught in my school. And eventually she's like, you've taken enough of these classes. You take like 3 more, you'll have a minor in this thing. And I was like, great. But one of those classes was a nutrition class. And at that point, I was a senior and I'd already started my journey with precision nutrition. Okay. And I was just like, what I was being taught in that college class versus what I was being taught in PN, I was like, this college class is useless. PN is incredibly practical. And so after I finished college, I finished up my PN, but I was actually like fully focused on a technology startup. So I was like, I could become a nutrition coach by just doing a precision nutrition certification. I didn't need to go to college to be this, so I might as well use this college degree. And about a year and a half into that tech startup, I realized, man, I'm spending all my free time like researching nutrition at the gym. Like, why don't I just make fitness and nutrition my career? So I went from tech startup world to being a complete pleb in the fitness world and, coaching 5 a.m. CrossFit classes and all that good stuff.
So was that kind of your first foray into coaching was in the CrossFit gym?
Yeah. I was into CrossFit while I was in college. It was what I would do when I was training in the off season. I was a lacrosse player in college, and in the off season, I would just go to the local CrossFit gym and I was just a member there. And then eventually they were like, dude, you should get your level 1 and you can coach classes. I was like, cool, I'll do my level 1, but I won't coach classes. And I got lucky. I had Jason Khalipa taught the nutrition part of the level 1. And I was like, wow, that was the first time I think I'd ever heard anything other than eat more, get big, eat less, get small. It was like zone diet and paleo. Right. And it's like, what? Like measuring things out and, getting your quantities right and quality. Like I thought it was just a simple equation. And that kind of led me down a bit of a rabbit hole, which ultimately kind of led to precision nutrition being my first real nutrition cert.
Right. And so once you completed the PN, did you put it into practice right away, or was it kind of something you shelved for a few years and then eventually came back to it?
Yeah, funny enough, I offered donation-based sessions originally just to kind of get my feet wet and practice with it. And so I would just, let people know, hey, if you want to do a nutrition coaching session, you can just pay me what you think it's worth. And funny enough, pretty much everybody thought my time was worth $20 an hour, which was less than I got paid for a CrossFit class. So I was like, this is terrible. Can I even make money as a nutrition coach?
So was it like the session's done and then they have to give you money, or was it like an online sign up and then they would, like, as part of the checkout process, have to pick an amount and put in a credit card? How did it work?
Oh, it was not that sophisticated. It was just like someone would ask me questions at the CrossFit gym I was working at or training at, and I would just be like, answer that question. And then if they start asking more questions, I was like, how about we do just like sit down and do a coaching session? I was like, I'm a new coach, but how about we sit down and do a session and, you can pay me whatever you think it's worth. Mm-hmm. And like I said, inevitably people would give me like $10, $20. I was like, what the heck? I just spent an hour with you.
Right.
Yeah, it was funny.
But I mean, even though you probably weren't getting anywhere near what your time was worth at that point, did you find that was valuable in just kind of like getting out there, starting the process of coaching and kind of getting comfortable with the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we can talk about it a bit, but I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was trying to charge too much too fast as a coach and then not getting the experience. I think it was really valuable, the path I was on, with like doing the sessions for essentially nothing originally, and just getting the reps in. Because when you first start coaching, even if you have coaching experience like I did, in the gym, you still kind of suck. It's not like you're a great coach yet. You haven't seen enough. You don't have enough context, and that's where I was at. And I tried to go high ticket too fast, and I stopped getting the reps because I didn't have the sales skills, the marketing skills, any of that to actually get clients. And all of a sudden I had like a year-long period where I was like, well, I've been taught that I have to sell high ticket. I can't give myself away for free anymore. And I was getting no experience. And I think that was a huge setback for me. But the free or like donation sessions, they were very valuable in the beginning. Right. It got me some momentum. It got me some experience. And it also got me in front of people. And people started seeing me as like, oh, this guy knows about nutrition.
Right. So if you were going to go back and advise yourself as a coach, how would you maybe have changed the process, or how would you have advised yourself to, execute this, get in the reps, but also, you need to make some money along the way too? How would you have done it differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would advise and go back is like, all right, focus on getting your income elsewhere other than nutrition coaching. That way you don't have to make it work. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was when I started out, I was like, man, people aren't really paying me for this, but I really want this to be my career. So I ended up hiring a business coach that was a general business coach. And they weren't like niche specific. They weren't like, a business coach for nutrition coaches.
Right.
And, it was just this general, they were kind of like a business coach for business coaches, really. And it was this general thing of like, you got to go high ticket. You need to charge at least $3,000 for a 90-day program. Like, you need all these things that are valid and I think valuable at some point in the process. But the problem is, by switching to that too early, like I said, I think I capped my growth because I only ended up getting about, I think, 2 clients at $3,000 for 3 months over the course of almost a year. So I only got 2 clients worth of experience in that entire year. And it wasn't until afterwards that I went back to this model of, giving people the valuable session. And actually at that point I switched it to, instead of donation based, because the $10 to $20 didn't move the needle, being in exchange for like a testimonial. And then that way I could kind of get some social proof. Because at that point I saw the value in having social proof and being able to sell myself. And so I think the biggest thing I'd say is like, if it doesn't feel right to jump to high ticket when you don't have experience, then don't. Like, charge what you're confident in charging and, generate your income elsewhere until you gain the experience to feel more confident charging more. And I think I could have saved myself that year of pretty much no progress and putting myself into a little bit of debt, and instead, made more incremental progress. I think I would have been much further ahead. And that's the thing that I think I would advise myself on is, it's okay to take it slow.
Right. And at that time you were coaching CrossFit classes and kind of working in the gym. And then do you find that there was some value in, being at the gym, being around people, giving nutrition information there to build your client base early, or maybe not? I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, big time. I think it was huge. I think one of the parts of my mistake was that business coach that I worked with, they said, go all in. And so I actually stopped coaching as many classes and stopped doing PTs and, kind of was like, I can't, burn the ships. I can't have this safety net.
Yep.
When really that was actually probably the thing that I needed the most, was that reliable income source so that I could have slow played the nutrition business. But then once I got back into it, like once I realized, okay, like the system that I was taught, it's not working for me right now. And so I went back to the gym and I started coaching more classes, started doing more PTs, generated income that way to start paying off that business coaching experience. But the real benefit was that more people were asking me questions about nutrition. So now I was starting to actually understand, what are people struggling with? And then I actually was able to write a newsletter and a weekly, how they have the WOD blogs at CrossFit gyms back in the day. Yeah. So I would do like a nutrition article on the WOD blog once a week. I would do a nutrition thing in the newsletter about once a month. And so now all of a sudden it was like I was taking what people were asking me in the gym and I was actually creating some content around it. And then that way it was like quite valuable for people. I was getting out in front of a community of, I was lucky, 500 people in the gym. And it just led to at least a lot of curiosity. And eventually when I did start offering things, there was kind of a built-in market for it, which is invaluable.
Yeah.
As a coach that runs challenges, I needed my life back. I had stuff all over the place. A Facebook group for community interaction, Google Sheets for check-ins and measurements, and was drowning in email communication. As my challenges grew past just a handful of people, I started to notice clients were falling through the cracks. I began researching virtual assistants because I just couldn't manage it all. And truthfully, the client experience was going down the drain. Luckily, a friend recommended Coach Catalyst and just told me to trust her. I'm sure glad I did. Now I can run my challenges with 2 or 200 clients with just a few clicks. The lessons get delivered on the right days, the accountability happens automatically, and most importantly, the communication is all in one spot. I even created 2 new challenges from the Coach Catalyst library. Best part, didn't have to change a thing. I used to spend 15 minutes just trying to log into all the apps I needed. Now I log in and my dashboard tells me who needs a shout out and who needs a kick in the butt in about 15 seconds. I feel like a huge weight is lifted off of my shoulders. I can finally spend my time coaching again instead of worrying about all the admin work. Do your brain a favor and get Coach Catalyst.
And I mean, being able to leverage that someone else's audience, right? I mean, you're getting paid essentially for free, right? To be able to get in front of them on a regular basis and start to build that authority with that group of people and get your foot, really in the door and get some momentum going with the business. And so what was the next step then? When did you start to see, okay, now I have enough momentum with the nutrition business that maybe I can, take the foot off the gas with the coaching and focus more on the nutrition? Was there a turning point there?
Yeah. For me, it was really when the nutrition coaching business started generating more income than the PT and CrossFit classes. So once I hit that point and it was reliable in the sense that I noticed that people were signing up again, because initially I still did a 90-day program. Okay. And then I realized people would sign up and then they would kind of go on renewal. And it got to the point where I was like, oh, actually there's a good amount of retention here. And so I was like, I think I can comfortably, initially I scaled way back. I went to, I'm just going to coach 3 classes a week and kind of keep my favorite PT clients. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I just hit this point where the amount of demand outstripped my ability to deliver on the nutrition coaching because I was still doing other things. So that was the point where I was like, okay, I've got a lot of experience. I've kind of created some systems around this. I think I can start looking at potentially hiring some other people. But I also need to free up some time in order to potentially hire and manage some other people. So that's the point where I completely, cut off doing anything other than the nutrition business. And that took maybe 18 months after I kind of got back into it. After the kind of year, I wouldn't say off, but struggling and not really working with clients.
And were you meeting with people in person? Were you doing kind of one-to-one meetings in person? Was it more of a group model? What was the structure of your business and how did you set it up?
Yeah, so initially I was meeting mostly with people in person because a lot of my client base was actually from the CrossFit gym where I was working. So there was just an office upstairs that I was able to use. And I would just schedule people in, make sure the office was open, and have sit down face-to-face consultations. But over time, I realized, and this might not sound like a big revelation now, but at the time it was, I was like, I think I'd like to start moving this business online. And most people would be like, well, duh. I was like, I don't want to not be able to travel. One of the things that I didn't like about the gym life was that I had no ability to generate an income if I was traveling. There was no paid time off. There was no anything like that. It's like, if I'm not putting hours in, I'm not getting dollars out. And so I was like, I think maybe I can start moving some of this online. And at the time, this was probably 2024, something like that. No, wait, we're 2014.
2014, we're moving to the future.
Yeah. 2014. So at that point, there wasn't really much precedence. There wasn't a lot of people who were doing online nutrition coaching at that point. So there wasn't many people I could model what I was doing off of. But, and at that point, the technology wasn't really there. There wasn't online fitness tracking apps. There, it wasn't Zoom was a big thing at that point. Right. But I started looking around and finding different tools that I could use to move some of the experience of coaching my clients online. And I didn't make a wholesale change on people, but I was like, how can we do check-ins in between our in-person sessions online? And I started developing a process for that. And then eventually I started having people who would be like, hey, can we just do a phone consult? I can't make it into the gym today, work's running late, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I started doing more just phone consultations instead of face-to-face, which saved a lot of time for both me and the client. then eventually that transitioned towards using, I think we were using like Google Hangouts or something for a little while. But yeah, I just started developing this like, oh, here's a tool that I can use to like serve my clients better. And it turned out that for some people, the online coaching actually was a better experience for them than got to drive to the gym and schedule the time with Matt and sit down face to face. And it took some time to develop those systems and figure out what worked. But over time I did. And, that's why I think I was able to then hire other coaches, train them up on the systems, and, deliver a good experience to hundreds of clients instead of, tens.
And so at this point, we're using kind of like a PN type approach where you're dealing with behaviors and dealing with habits and that kind of stuff, or were you kind of mixing in some kind of macro-based things as well?
Yeah, it was quite a hybrid approach. So I would describe the approach as like macros were the guideline or like the target. It was like, okay, here's the macros, this is what ideal might look like. But then I used a very PN style coaching process where it was like, okay, we want to focus on the habits that will help you get there. It was really a client-led journey where it was like every like one-to-one session was about kind of workshopping with the client. Okay, what, this is something that you're struggling with. Let's talk about some things you think can potentially fix that. And that way they were coming up with the solutions and we're a little more bought into it. So it was very kind of a PN approach in terms of the actual coaching process. And then I, over time, started putting some other tools in the toolkit and also drawing from the well of that like complementary and alternative medicine wisdom that I gained in college. And really started taking a more holistic look. And just, the name of the company was Beyond Macros because I did want it to be more than just like, here's a macro plan and we're going to, coach you how to, if it fits your macros. It was like, okay, macros is a guideline. It's going to be an amazing coaching process, but let's also look at all the other things that surround the whole human and how can we make sure that, we're helping them make big lifestyle changes as well, which again, doesn't sound like it was like a revolutionary idea, but at the time, there wasn't really any options for nutrition coaching where it was like, you're taking the whole picture into account. So I think at the time it was a pretty innovative thing. And I say that because I got that feedback from a lot of people who were influential in the industry that, heard about what we're doing and kind of gave me that feedback.
That's awesome. And so initially when you got started, right, because you were part of a bigger ecosystem, you had access to lots of people, you were able to get in front of them, right? That was kind of your built-in marketing, right? That was your built-in awareness. Yeah. And then once you transitioned out of that, how did you kind of transition your marketing and how did you now, was it very referral based because you had a big enough pool of people to kind of do that? Or how did your marketing change now that you didn't have this kind of built-in audience?
Yeah, so things really shifted over time and gradually. I think initially it was really what I now teach to our students is like, finding good borrowed audiences is great because then you can kind of piggyback off the social proof there. You also get access to a great audience. You can create kind of a win-win-win where it's like win for them as the audience owner, win for their audience, and then you kind of win as a side effect by getting clients. And I came to that because for me, it was like first borrowed audience was the gym. I had that gym. And even though I wasn't coaching there anymore, I was still a member. I was still, competing on their regionals team. I was still like a very active member of the community. And I still ran workshops, seminars, and challenges at that gym. So, it wasn't like I completely unplugged. And I think that's a problem a lot of people have is that when they move their business online, they kind of ignore their in-person opportunities or their current networks that they already have access to. And that's an absolute goldmine and not to be ignored. Just because you have an online business doesn't mean that you can't have in-person or in real life marketing, and sometimes the best marketing is in real life because, a lot of people hear you want people to know, like, and trust you. And it's like, well, the internet for a long time was a place where it's like everybody wanted to scam you. And so, these, online marketing, especially in 2014, it was still like, is this guy trying to scam me? Whereas in person, it's like, well, people have probably been to your house. People see you at the gym. Like people know where you live. It's like, there's kind of a built-in trust factor to in person. And there's also a huge built-in authority factor when somebody who has an audience that trusts them, when they trust you enough to bring you in. And, especially if you're running a workshop or a challenge or something like that, and you're the authority figure. So I think originally there was like the local star power, the local celebrity. I've heard some people say, that was a really important part of the phase, and borrowed audiences. Initially the gym, but I had a huge breakthrough opportunity when, a guest for the Wadcast podcast canceled. And I think Scott McGee asked Josh Gallegos, who was, MC for the CrossFit Games for a long time and a good friend of mine from the gym at the time. And Josh was a client of mine. And he's like, hey, how about you interview Matty Walrath? He's, local. He can probably show up tonight, even though you had that cancellation. And yeah, he just totally teed me up. And then I got onto that podcast, and since then, Scott McGee told me it was one of the top 10 podcasts that they had. And I was a complete unknown, a complete nobody. But I just had the opportunity to go on there, which was honestly it was the biggest CrossFit podcast at the time. And that was totally my niche. And they used to call it, I think, the Wadcast bump, where it was like anybody who goes on the Wadcast, like they have such rabid diehard fans that you're going to get like a ton of followers on Instagram, and like everybody's going to want to work with you. And that's exactly what happened. It was a huge kind of breakout moment where all of a sudden after that podcast, the balance of clients that I had that were from my local kind of in-person opportunities and my like personal network, it almost shifted where that was the probably minority of my clients, and the majority were people who I had no relationship to prior, because I started getting that exposure. And then that also, being on that podcast, being on a top tier podcast, got me plenty of other opportunities to go on to other podcasts. Yeah.
Right. So there was probably an influx of people from that podcast. How did you handle that? Did you have systems in place to be able to like manage the inputs that were happening now? Or was it just like, shitstorm, things are hitting the fan and you're just trying to, keep the boat above water?
Yeah, the latter. It was total shitstorm, trying to keep the boat above water. Wasn't not expecting it or ready for it. Like I said, it was like a guest had canceled and I was like a last minute like rope in on a Tuesday night, like finished coaching, and Josh, like, yo, head over to do stream in an hour and you can get on the Wadcast podcast. I was like, oh, dang. Dude, I don't even think I had dinner. I just like biked straight over there.
Right.
Yeah, so I wasn't ready. That was like completely out of left field.
And at this time, it's still just you, right? Did you have a team at all at this point, or was it just?
Yeah, it was just me. Yeah.
So how did you handle it? Did you just take on everybody and just like, not sleep for a period of time and then figure out the systems?
No, I couldn't take on everybody that started. Like I had too many leads. Like that was honestly an inflection point where I was like, I'd already thought about potentially hiring another coach to come on and be an assistant coach with me. Because I'd worked with, I think, well over 100 clients at that point. And I had probably about 50 active clients at the time. Somewhere like 50, 75. Anyways, number's not important. But the thing is, like, I was already feeling pretty overwhelmed. I was still coaching some classes at the gym. Like I had a lot on my plate. And it felt like every day was like, I was training for regionals. I had like 4 hours of training a day. I felt like every day was like 4 a.m. to like 9 to 10 p.m., just nonstop. And I was totally not ready. But at that point, I was like, you know what? I think it's time to put up a waiting list. And let me tell you, the waiting list is an amazing tool to build authority, because people are like, yo, if this guy has a waiting list, it must be good.
Right.
Yeah. So I was just like, all right, you know what? If I take on more clients, like it's going to be a shitty experience for everybody.
Yep.
And I know that that's like, especially from the tech world, like churn is horrible. And I knew from being in the startup world that you don't want to create a business where it creates a negative word of mouth and people are dropping off at a fast rate. I had a business that was like pretty referral based, really good retention already. And I didn't want to break that. I knew that that was kind of an important thing. And I thought that there was a chance that this Wadcast podcast thing was a one-off, and I didn't want to break my business, ruin relationships with clients and all that for something that might only be a quick bump, and then, it would have been back to normal. So at that point, I was like, all right, well, I've got this waiting list, and I was like, I literally went onto the Precision Nutrition Coaches directory, and I looked to see who lives in Los Angeles near me that's a PN certified coach. And I also looked in New Jersey, where I'm from, to see if there was anybody over there. And it turned out that one of the other coaches at my CrossFit gym was PN certified. I was like, what the heck? I had no idea. So then I asked him, I was like, hey man, do you potentially want to work for me? And he was game. Yeah, he was super keen. And so I trained him up. He was already a great coach. Like, I really respected him as a coach, working with him as a colleague. And I was like, this is amazing that, this guy is literally under the same roof as me a couple days a week. And so I was able to train him up. And I asked the CrossFit gym owner that I would go to when I was visiting my family in New Jersey. I was like, hey, do you know anybody who's a nutrition coach? She's like, oh, one of our coaches actually, she just dropped out of her registered dietitian internship because she feels as though telling people to drink Diet Coke instead of Coke, and feeding them, cheese sandwiches in the hospital is probably not what she expected when she got into it. And she's jaded on that, but she might be interested in working with you. And so then I interviewed her and I was like, oh, wow, our philosophies really align. And she was interested. She was like, oh, wow, this is a chance for me to actually use my education in a way that feels good. And so all of a sudden I had two coaches who were like highly educated, already had great coaching experience. And all I really had to do was kind of onboard them to the tech systems that I was using. And what I ended up doing was I took everybody who was on the waiting list and I said, hey, listen, if you want to get off the waiting list, what we'll do is I've got two coaches in training at the moment. If you would be willing to, in order to get off the waiting list, would you allow them to be your primary coach? And I will oversee and shadow the whole thing. I'll be giving them, feedback. It's just, and that's what I did. And a lot of people agreed. So I had a waiting list of, dozens of people. So about 20 people came off the waiting list. I gave 10 each to those coaches. And I just oversaw the process, shadowed, gave feedback, and ultimately developed a process there to eventually become a manager of other coaches and kind of scaled my team up a bit like that over time. But that's kind of how it started.
So tell me a little bit about like the business structure, right? And so you're bringing on these new coaches, and there may be someone listening to the podcast where they're thinking about hiring someone. Were you like, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount a month? Were you like, hey, I'll give you X per client? Was it like, hey, you have a salary? How are you thinking about compensating these coaches to be part of your team?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I thought, with that Wadcast bump that, this could have been a one-off. This could have been like, this is the high tide mark. This isn't the new normal. Yep. And so I didn't want to introduce risk into the business. I'm all about like, as an investor, as a business owner, like mitigating downside risk. And I knew that if the business went back to where it was in normal, if I was putting people onto a salary and kind of the tide came back out, then now my income is going to be less than my living expenses to pay those coaches a salary. So in order to kind of mitigate the downside risk, I brought them on and paid them per client. Okay. And it was like, that way I was like, okay, you get paid, a portion of what the client pays. And then, the rest goes to plowing back into marketing, trying to ride this momentum wave we had and, obviously retain profits for the business. And eventually, once the business hit the point where I was like, okay, this is the new normal and we're growing, then eventually I did put some of the full-time coaches on a salary, but I maintained for any assistant or part-time coaches, I always did it on a per-client basis.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of had a lot of this, we call it viral marketing, right? Like, that's really like viral before really the internet viral. And so what was the strategy after that? Was it enough momentum now where it was like a built-in referral strategy? Was there other outbound that was going on? what was kind of the strategy to continue to build this business? Because now it's a legit business where you're generating a lot of income, you have employees, and now there's a kind of responsibility that you need to keep generating income and, go from there. So what was the strategy then in order to keep growing the business?
Yeah, so I really doubled down on the kind of borrowed audiences and referrals. I think a lot of people, when they hear a referral-based business, they think all the referrals are being generated from your clients. And that wasn't necessarily the case for us. We got a lot of client referrals, but to be honest, client referrals in a nutrition business, it's funny. It's like, not many people are like, oh my God, I feel, so fat. I really need a nutrition coach. It's like, that's not a conversation that's had very often. And people feel weird being like, I wouldn't go up to you and be like, oh, Trevor, looks like you're getting a bit of a dad bod. Would you like to get an introduction to my nutrition coach?
Right.
It's like kind of an awkward conversation that doesn't come up very much. So it really came down to encouraging our clients to share their results, because I learned that because when it was mostly in-person marketing, I'll never forget it. One of my clients, I was coaching the 10 a.m. CrossFit class on a Tuesday. One of my clients was in there. There was rope climbs programmed. He takes his shirt off, climbs up to the top of the rope, and someone's like, "Dan, Daniel, you look amazing." And he just at the top of the rope points to me and he goes, "All thanks to that guy." And I was like, wow. And then all of a sudden, three people from the class came up and were like, "Oh, what has he been doing?"
Right.
And it just generated that interest. And so that generated the conversations for me. And I realized as we transitioned to online, how could I replicate that? And it's just really encouraging clients to share their own stories of transformation, because then that creates people asking them, "Oh, what have you done?" And then it's like, "Oh, I worked with them. Would you like an intro?" And it created better conversations. So that was a really good source of clients for us. But like I was saying, to come back full circle, a referral-based business can be based off of referrals from other professionals. So I had physical therapist at the gym, amazing guy. I really respected him. He's the one who I realized he was getting rep after rep after rep. He was always fully booked for his physical therapy business. And he was getting so good with his physical therapy skills. I was like, I need to do that. I need to, get more reps in. Right. And then eventually he worked with me and I helped him get shredded. And so he was just referring people to me left and right. And I was like, this is amazing. Somebody I have so much respect for, is putting this much trust in me. This is awesome. And then, his wife also, she was a stretch therapist at the gym, as well as a PT. She referred a ton of clients to me. All the other coaches at the gym, they would refer their PT clients. Joshy G was an amazing source of referrals for me because he was an influencer. He was the MC for the CrossFit Games. And, he was kind of coming up in the WWE world. And he was referring a ton of people into me. So I had all these people who I was very close to. They referred a ton of people into me. And honestly, I don't think the business would have gotten anywhere close to it if it wasn't for, the owner of the CrossFit gym, the people who were there at Paradiso CrossFit. I don't think the business ever would have gotten to that level without their help. And I just continued to develop relationships that led to referrals. And so everything was kind of viral, referral, organic for the longest time. Eventually I moved into some paid marketing strategies, but that was kind of it for a long time. I built the business up to the point where I had 6 employees before I spent $1 on ads.
That's awesome. So when you teach your coaches borrowed audiences, how do you go about helping them figure out where the borrowed audiences are? Where should I go? What are some good first steps for a coach to kind of look for borrowed audiences that they might be able to partner with?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of things you want to take into consideration. I'm not an advocate of niching too early. But once you kind of identify who it is, even broadly, that you work with, that really helps narrow down the borrowed audience opportunities. So for me, I had what is now a broad niche, but at the time was quite niche, which was CrossFitters. And that really narrowed it down. It's what podcasts serve CrossFitters? CrossFit gyms, easy, obvious. what other companies or influencers have CrossFit based audiences? It was like, what are some of the adjacent things to CrossFit? Olympic weightlifting, like, powerlifting, all these other things. I was like, oh, there's magazines like, what was it? Oh man, it's funny. I wrote for them for a little while. I'm completely forgetting their name now, but it's neither here nor there. It was like, what are the, magazines or newsletters or whatever? Yeah. Who are the people who already have the audience that I'm serving? And so once you kind of even broadly know what your niche is, then it becomes a lot easier to narrow down on the borrowed audience opportunities. And I think that getting in front of kind of high intent audiences is great as well. So what I mean by that is, if you have a gym that is a borrowed audience, like, what is the common thing with people from the gym? Well, with a CrossFit gym, it's like, some people, it's like stronger, leaner, like they kind of want to look like a CrossFitter. They want to, feel like a badass because, their body can do amazing things and they want to experience that for themselves. And it's like, what have they done? They've invested a good amount of money to be a part of that. And so it's like, there's high intent there. It's like they are paying for a solution to a problem that nutrition can help solve. Mm-hmm. And so the higher the intent of a borrowed audience you can get, the better. It's like, you might, for example, like we have some people who it's like they'll use the opportunity to get in front of their church, but it's like a church goer is not necessarily a high intent for nutrition coaching. But the thing is, it's like, if you have, a coaching business for Christian women, then that's actually amazing because you're getting directly in front of the audience that you want to be in front of. And it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a linear process. It might be a non-linear process of getting clients. You might get, you might run a little workshop and nobody at your church, none of those women decide to work with you, but they got a lot out of it. And, they start implementing the things and they look good. And someone asked them, what did you do? And they said, oh, it was, Nancy was the coach who helped me realize these things. And then, that person ends up being like, hey, can you help me? And then you have a potential client. Like it's often non-linear if you have kind of more the less high intent borrowed audience opportunities, but it doesn't mean they weren't worthwhile. So that's another really important thing as well. And I think one of the most important things that a lot of people do wrong when it comes to borrowed audiences, and you're amazing at this, is people treat it as like a one-night stand with a borrowed audience, and they are like, what's in it for me? And, they might jump onto a podcast and then, they do everything to like schmooze you up to get onto the podcast, and then there's no follow-up. They don't share the podcast. They, don't do anything to provide additional value. It's just like, what can I get out of it? Whereas, like I said, what you do really well is like, anytime, even when you're hosting a speaker, it's like you develop a long-term relationship. And you do a really good job of this naturally, but I think that this is something that's important for people to understand is when it comes to borrowed audiences, it's not about this quick extraction. You're not trying to immediately harvest clients. You actually want to build a good relationship with the audience owner. And one of the best ways to do that is to really, truly be in service to their audience. And then for them to get that feedback, like, oh, it was amazing. How, like when you came into the ONCC, like people really gave us feedback that was a very valuable session for them. ONCC is our online nutrition coach community, the Facebook group. And people gave us feedback that was amazing. So it's like, heck yeah, I'd have you back anytime because you didn't try to like come in and, do like a big pitch and provide no value. You just came in value driven. And I think that's really important to come in value driven. How can you create a win for their audience? That creates a win for the audience owner. But then also, like, what can you do to develop a relationship with the audience owner if you actually vibe with them? Like, you and I have become friends over time. We chat outside of the context of our businesses. So it's like, if you genuinely have somebody who has an audience that's similar and like you want to develop a relationship with them, then, go that route as well. Don't have it be this just like surface level numbers game. Because like I said, the referral sources that I had, those were long-term relationships. That wasn't just like refer me one client and then like screw you.
Right.
Thanks. Thanks. But
do you have any, so some people are very guarded with their audiences to an extent to like, they spent a lot of money and they spent a lot of time building this audience. Do you have any strategies or tools, tricks that you kind of teach your students on how to maybe, that first ask? Or is it just kind of asking enough people and waiting, finally you get a yes and then you over deliver and you provide a great value? Or is there anything that you've seen strategy wise that maybe gets someone to yes a lot sooner or gets them more yeses when they are asking?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat domain specific at times how to structure the first ask. My friend Christine McAllister, she has what she calls the powerhouse method. She recorded training on that for our clients. And that's actually become part of our core curriculum because she is amazing at helping people book podcast guesting opportunities. She's like the best in the world at it. And her strategy in a nutshell is like, you just pitch once, and she has a very specific template for an email pitch, for like cold reach outs, but it's like, do your research, find the people, start with, if you've never been on a podcast before, it's like you would start with some of the smaller shows, get some experience, get some of the bad ones out of the way before there's a big audience listening. Right. And kind of refine your message and, still develop a relationship with those people because you never know, where their podcast is going to end up.
Yep.
And then eventually that allows you to start levering up towards some of the bigger opportunities. And you can, when you send a pitch, be like, oh, I've been on Coach Catalyst and Podcast
Right.
and all this. And it creates a little bit more, clout.
Right.
And we have kind of adapted her powerhouse method for podcast guesting to a lot of the different domains where you might have a guest opportunity. But for me, the thing that worked really well for, let's say, establishing gym relationships was to actually go physically into the gym. Drop in, because it was CrossFit classes, drop in, speak with the coaches. I was a good athlete, so oftentimes, I was a regionals athlete. So it was like,
Right.
I was good. Like, I'd show up and people would be like, who is this guy?
Right.
And then the coaches would want to have a combo with me. And oftentimes I'd end up meeting the owner. I might, go grab some food with the coaching staff and just develop a relationship with people at that gym. I'd follow them on Instagram type of thing and, still chat. And eventually that might lead to an opportunity where it's like, hey, if I'm back in New York, it's like, hey, I'm coming to New York. Would you guys want me to run a workshop on nutrition for your members? That type of thing. And it's like, oh, I'm coming back to Austin. It's like, whatever. I traveled a lot. And part of that was, good for business marketing. But business marketing was also good for my traveling.
So when did the travel bug start to get you? Or when did the itch start happening? Where you're like, I have this business now that is not location dependent. Was it kind of like you got an aha moment? Like, man, why don't I do this from somewhere else and then somewhere else? Or did it transpire a different way?
Yeah, I had the travel bug early on. And I grew up in a 1.7 square mile town in New Jersey, like small town. My first year of college was in New Jersey. Like my world was very small for a long time.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was like, all right, I need a shake up and I'm going to California. And then from there, it was just like, I was like, holy crap, the world's so much different than friggin' New Jersey. I can't wait to go see it all. And so I had that travel bug all through college and just after when I was doing the startup thing. And then, being in the fitness industry kind of grounded me. And there was all this kind of pent up travel energy. And there was a point where I just had this knowing, like, everything in LA is great. Like, I have great relationships, a great business, like a great house, like all these things. Everything was going great. There was no reason I should have wanted to leave, but there was just this like kick, like, dude, like, go travel. And I was like, I finally have the opportunity. I'm doing it. In 2017, I think it was, I just, sold everything, packed up and, got a plane ticket.
So you burned the ships. You sold everything and just said, all right, I'm going to do this. So was it like, I'm going to do this full time, or I'm going to go to this city for 6 months and I'm going to go to this city? Or was it just like book a plane ticket somewhere and see where it takes you?
Yeah, I booked a plane ticket to Bali. Like I said, the digital nomad mecca.
Right.
And from there, everything just kind of unfolded.
How long did you stay in Bali? Or was this like Bali and then you went to Australia and then that's kind of how it all ended up? Or were you able to kind of bounce around?
I went to Bali, Australia, Costa Rica. From Costa Rica, I went back to the States I was like, I want to do the van life now. Like back at that point, I had been traveling full time for about a year, just out of a backpack, backpacker's backpack. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. But, I felt like I was getting out of routine and, just like feeling a bit kind of over it. Like it wasn't really my ideal lifestyle. And sometimes you just got to do it to uncover it. I was like, I want something that feels like, I was like, the van life would be good. Cause then it's like, I can have a mace and kettlebells and like my bike and like, I can have a kitchen and actually cook for myself instead of eating every meal out. It was just like, yeah, that seems like the thing that I want to do. And I did that for a little while, but I'd already met my wife at that point, and I was just like, man, like, I want to make that work. So then I ended up cutting the van life short, selling the van after, I don't even know, 8 months, and then came over to Australia.
But you built out the van yourself, didn't you? Or built out pieces of it yourself?
Yeah, built it out. I wouldn't say myself. I had, my dad and my brother and one of our friends who's a contractor would come in and solve problems when I was like, man, I could do carpentry for 90-degree angles, but, this van curves. What do I do?
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, built everything, with some helping hands.
Right.
And it was an awesome experience.
So one thing I'm always curious about a nomadic lifestyle. So how did you find like a sense of community? And so one thing when you're traveling from one place to the next and you're never really spending a really extended time, you never get enough time to really create some bonds. And then, so you're kind of always in a new spot. And so did you ever struggle with that in finding or was it new and exciting and you're pretty easy to talk to and you can meet people really easily. I mean, how did that go for you?
Yeah, I definitely struggled with it at times. One of the biggest lessons I had from that period was don't travel to places, travel to people. And so by the time that I got the van, I realized, I like well and truly realized that. That was a realization I had in the kind of backpack phase. And so I built out the van and it was just like, I'm going to go here because I know somebody there and the place is cool. And then I was like, I'm going to go here because, all right, that's like, I'm close to it and that's a place I want to visit, but I'm not going to spend as much, I'm not budgeting as much time there. Sure, I'd meet new people, but it's kind of like, nebulous relationships, if you will, are just like, have a chat with somebody, but then you never talk to them again. And then luckily I had, worked with thousands of nutrition clients at that point. And I had clients in Canada and the US. And as I traveled, I would actually get to meet up with some of these people who I only saw on a Zoom screening. And it was awesome. I was like, holy crap, you're way more jacked than I thought, or you're way more tall, you're way more, it's just like, but it was really cool to, there were a few times that, I would just pop into a place because I was like, I have a high concentration of, Beyond Macros clients that came from this area. And then, that was a really cool chapter. The only thing that sucked about that chapter was being long distance with my now wife and not being with her, but otherwise it was a fantastic chapter, just traveling to people. And oftentimes, if I felt like I wanted to plant somewhere, I would plant somewhere and I just had the van to be able to do it. I fell in love with Asheville, North Carolina, and, had a pretty cool group of people that I'd connected in with there. And I stayed there for probably 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And then I also loved Knoxville, Tennessee. I had a client who I got to meet him for the first time and we just hit it off. And I was really just going to go for a weekend. And he's like, dude, you should stay for Thanksgiving. And I'm pretty sure it was I came around Halloween. He's like, dude, just stay for Thanksgiving. I was like, what? That's so far away. He's like, dude, just do it. And I was like, all right, fine. And I did. And it was awesome. Really got to find a cool community at his gym in Knoxville, Tennessee. And had some amazing experiences of community like that.
Right. That's awesome. I really like the thing you said about traveling to people and not places. I think that's a super powerful frame in looking at the travel experience. So as far as your days were structured, I mean, were you able to find a rhythm with your days, or had you built Beyond Macros to a point now where you weren't maybe necessary in the day-to-day operations? it was more kind of overseeing things and checking in with people. What was life like from your kind of inputs to the business?
Yeah, so at that point, I wasn't directly working with more than 5 clients. Like I had some just long-term clients who I'd been working with, some of them for like 3 years. And it was just like, we had an amazing relationship. It was no energetic drain on me whatsoever to work with them, but I never like onboarded any new clients. It was just like, I kind of had these like 5 clients who I'd worked with for ages. That was the only coaching I was doing at that point. Everything else was managing my coaching staff and making sure that, I was overseeing, making sure that they were, performing high quality. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes I had to have awkward conversations and fire people and all that, which sucks, but, it's a part of business. I was really just in that kind of CEO role. And, there was a point in time where I don't think I had to put more than like 4 hours into the business a week, because I had an amazing woman who was essentially operating the business around that point in time. And so it really just became interfacing with her, making sure that she was empowered to be able to kind of manage both having a client load and the operations of the business. Yeah. And I kind of became this dancing monkey at the front of the business, where it was like I would, jump on podcast appearances or, like do some social media stuff or, a webinar or something like that. But it wasn't a ton of work. Like things were kind of just rolling along nicely. Like I was earning like an income I was incredibly happy with. And I didn't feel the need for more. Like I didn't feel the need to like, I need to have a 7-figure business at this point. I was just like, I'm living my dream life. Like, why would I want to put more energy and more time in to get more money that I don't need right now? And that was kind of my mindset at the time.
That's like, to have that mindset is really rare, I would say, for kind of hard charging entrepreneur. Like you've done a lot of different things in the startup space and kind of started this from scratch. I think the hardest part for a lot of entrepreneurs is when to see like, oh, like, this is good. Like I'm okay right here. Where most people are just like, more. Like, what do you need more? Yeah. Like, I need more clients. I need more revenue. I need more profits. And it's like, okay. And there's never really a satisfaction on like enough. And so was that something that you are just like, it just is born into you? Is it something that you really had to kind of cultivate, or was it something that you really grappled with, where it's like, part of you is like, hey, let's push this thing and let's keep going. And another part of you is like, hey, we've got enough. Or how did you kind of come to that realization? Because I think it's really rare in the kind of business owner entrepreneurship space.
Yeah. And I think, I'm looking at it post hoc right now, So I think it's hard to really put myself back in the shoes of when I had that realization, because I am naturally a hard charger. Like I am naturally the person who's like, more is better. Yeah. I was like that as an athlete. It was like more practice is better. More, training is better. More. I think I'm kind of naturally inclined towards that, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it was. I think taking those classes in college and the like kind of Eastern philosophy, I realized that sometimes like, especially from a Chinese medicine standpoint, it was like, if you're like, you can get out of balance. And if you're too like yang like that without the kind of balance of the yin, then, it can create really bad health outcomes, and it can create kind of, the system blows up. And so I kind of had learned that philosophy where it's like, you don't necessarily want things to get out of balance, and excesses in some areas like aren't necessarily good. Like even if society kind of portrays them that way, it's like a unhealthy perspective from society. And so there was like the seed of it that was kind of planted in college from those kind of philosophies. And then I think over time, I just realized that, I was working so much, man. Early on in the business, it's like that 4 a.m. start to go to the CrossFit gym to like coach some classes and then train. And then it was just like what am I working towards? Like,
Right.
and once I started realizing what am I working towards, I was like, well, I'm working towards wanting to live the life that I want to live. And then it started getting me to question, well, what does the life I want to live look like? Mm-hmm. And this is something that I've philosophized on a lot lately. And I really think it's hard to know what you want your life to look like until you've kind of tried some of the things that you're dreaming about. And so that kind of led me to just like, all right, I kind of want to just like taste a lot of things in this human experience. Like I just want to, get out there and experience a lot of things, because then I've got context. Then I'm starting to learn more about like, what do I want? What don't I want? What's, what do I think I want because of conditioning in society and all that. And, being able to kind of be untethered by those things, I think is something that I've been doing since I was, in my early 20s. Like I don't wear shoes. I always say like socks, jocks, and shoes are a scam. Yeah.
I love it.
So like, I like to kind of challenge things and, challenge myself as well.
Yeah. And I mean, kudos to you to coming to that realization, in your, you're probably mid 20s at that point or late 20s. And so, but obviously you were not done, because Beyond Macros turned into really a coaching business where you're now teaching other coaches how to create. And I think what's interesting about how you guys approach coaching, it's like really building nutrition coaching businesses you love, rather than just like, hey, build the biggest business you can. It's more like build a business that you love and that feeds you, rather than just doing more. And so at what point did you guys decide like, hey, we gotten pretty good at this, and I maybe need that next challenge? When did you decide to do the business coaching?
Yeah, there was, so what actually happened was I had more people who were like, struggling with their coaching business. And so they'd send me an email with like a resume and be like, do you need a coach? Like I just finished my precision nutrition level 1. Like I'm having trouble getting clients. Like, can I, work for you type of thing. I was like, well, I don't really need inexperienced coaches.
Right.
And I was getting so many applications from people who wanted to work with us that eventually I was like, well, you know what? Like I do have, like, there is some turnover in the coaches. Sometimes I need an assistant coach to kind of back up some of our coaching staff. So, maybe I'll start charging for this. I'll just, because I'd had a few people who was like, oh, I want to work with you. And I'm like, cool. And then I bring them on and I spend 3 months kind of mentoring them and grooming them to, become a coach. And then they just peace out, never work for me. And I just spent 3 months developing a coach who then doesn't make me a single dollar, has, zero respect for me, and then goes and tries to start a competing business. It was just like, okay, that happened twice. And I was like, fool me twice, shame on me. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. If somebody wants to, get my direct mentorship, even if they're going to end up working with me, they're going to pay for it. They got to show that they actually want it. Because there were people who was like, they didn't necessarily quit, start another, business and compete with me. It was just like, they're like, this is too hard piece. I'm like, you're 2 months into a 3 month thing. You were about like, what's going on here? And so eventually I just realized, okay, I can package this into essentially a certification, where it was meant to be the like, what do you do after you've got you read the textbook, and you got your certification? How can I create an experience for people where they might not have gotten their own clients yet, but they can still get the experience of coaching clients? And so I essentially created this very experiential kind of like certification mentorship program where I took real clients that we had, redacted all their personal information, and created narratives. Like I wrote out the case studies of people I'd worked with. And so essentially I took these case studies and I acted them out. And so what I essentially did was I had a certification where it was like, you go through, you learn the stuff, and then it's very case study based. It's like, okay, first you're going to be my client, and then I would coach them, and then we would have a conversation. What did you notice about the session? What was that like for you? All that type of stuff. And then eventually it was like, okay, now you've seen this process as a client, roll switches. And I would act out, a couple different client cases and kind of get them that experience. And then we would have a conversation after, like, what did you notice about the session? What do you wish you did better? Those types of questions. And it was very like oriented around that, because the idea was this was going to be a feeder program for potentially becoming a coach with Beyond Macros, but it was a product. So we launched that, and there was a huge demand for it. Again, it was something that ended up immediately on a wait list. And then we did a second cohort, and both cohorts afterwards, they were like, I really liked the little business and marketing tips that you gave, but I wish that it was more than just tips. Like, if I'm going to go out and start my own business, I'd like more of that. And so that was kind of like a light bulb. And so then I bolted that on, I beefed that up, and then kind of did a third cohort where it was like, okay, there's the client experience, experiential side of it. But then there was also the, okay, here's the business, like business in a box, essentially, was what I was trying to create. Like, here's everything I did. And over time, that side of things really got a lot more attention. It was getting a little bit harder to sell the, VIP experience, like learn how to be a good coach. People are like, I already got a certification. Like, I just need clients. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll meet the market. Let's teach you how to get clients. And so really that side kind of took precedence. So it was kind of a gradual evolution towards that.
And so in the Beyond Macros, the we'll call it a B2C business, that was still fully functioning too. The systems were in place. You had people in place, and that was still going on. And then this other one kind of just built organically, kind of out of that. And then now, I mean, that's even grown since then. What does it look like today with kind of Beyond Macros, the coach side of things, kind of the B2B aspect?
Yeah. I mean, that's gone through phases. There was definitely a phase in that where, I pursued more. I was like, oh, let's scale this thing, because I had done some business coaching programs, and I'm a competitive guy. And so I saw other people who were scaling their business, like, I'm going to do that. And it was like, I was competitive. And then when I kind of got out of that, like business mastermind kind of environment, I realized once again, like my life doesn't look the way that I want it to look right now. Yeah. And in order for me to kind of sustain this scale of the business, I essentially have to rob Peter to pay Paul, or rob Matt to, pay the business growth.
Right.
And so I just, kind of made a conscious decision that this business exists for two reasons: to serve our clients and to help me and my business partner, Kate, essentially live the life that we want. And how can I build it so that it creates a win-win, win for our clients, win for us, and that ultimately came down to, okay, we got to stop scaling. We can't have a huge sales team, because that was one of the things that they teach in the business masterminds. Like, you got to have, a sales team full of closers and setters and all that. But the problem is, in order for a sales team to survive off of commissions, they need a lot of leads. So then it's like, okay, I've got to, pump a bunch of money into Facebook ads to make sure that they have enough leads coming in that they can eat. And then all of a sudden, so much of my business became about the front end acquisition of customers, so that, my front end employees were able to make a living, that all of a sudden it was like, all right, shit, now we got to kind of beef up the back end and hire more. And the cost structure just got out of control. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, why am I taking on this much risk, meaning like this much payroll expense every single month, where like, the business could be much smaller. I could be making just as much money. We could probably provide a better experience to people, like front end to back end. And, ultimately it could be a better model all the way around. Plus, I felt out of alignment because I was like, build the business of your dreams. And I didn't have it myself. I was like earning an income that most people would dream about, but, I wasn't like, this is my dream. I had a taste of what my dream was, like all that freedom, and I wanted that back. And so Kate and I have essentially, created the business where it's like, okay, what's the best thing that we can potentially offer to our clients based off of, now having 4 years of data, 4 years of kind of feedback and doing this iteration of Beyond Macros. And what do we want? And we're very clear about what we want out of life. And so, we make sure that the business doesn't take us further away from that. There's no more, robbing Matt and Kate to pay the business.
Right.
Yeah.
As a gym owner, Coach Catalyst is the key to having low turnover. For several years, I struggled and spent 10 to 20 hours a week communicating with clients via phone calls, Facebook Messenger, email, and text messages. I had tried everything to make my life more efficient. I was at my wit's end. And then I found Coach Catalyst. Since starting the software, I have found a life again, and my clients are thanking me for being so involved in their fitness life. I've cut my daily commitment to interacting with over 300 clients to under 15 minutes a day and have streamlined my 6-week challenges. I couldn't recommend it more. I just don't know if I would even be here today if it wasn't for Coach Catalyst. If you don't have an account already, you're missing out and not helping the people you could be.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on just that trajectory. Sometimes you get into those worlds of like bigger is better, where, well, maybe, but bigger comes at costs. And are you willing to, put in those costs now for maybe a different reward later, or, do you structure it in a way that, suits my lifestyle now and gives me what I need now? And you can do that, kind of in perpetuity as you want to. And so, kudos to you for like stopping, because I think it's hard for people when they get kind of that wheel going and you're kind of into it, and then being able to get out of that is really, really, really hard. And so, like, I mean, you guys are doing a phenomenal job in just helping coaches create VIP experiences for their clients and really create businesses that they love and to own it. So, like, I think that's for you, like, that's awesome. Like, hey, you felt like you were getting out of alignment and we're able to pull it back. And so that's awesome. And now it kind of gives you up the freedom to like dabble a little bit too, right? So now you can kind of do the side hustle thing and maybe like just play with some different things and see, is there anything right now, and let's keep it in like the health and fitness world that you're playing with? I know you're kind of doing some other things, but is there any kind of side gigs in that world?
Nah, nothing in the health and fitness realm. I think Beyond Macros occupies that space for me at this point. And that's a lot of my kind of side hustles and dabblings are in other things. I'm doing some things for myself that are maybe considered health and fitness. Like I just joined it's like an online course for surfing, and it's pretty much this guy who,
interesting.
Yeah, total legend. It's like dry land training for surfing. I think his dad was an Olympic diver, and part of the Olympic diving training was like you put your body through the shapes on dry land that you're going to make in the air diving into a pool. And so this guy created a surfing system it's almost like Tai Chi for surfing. It's like you put yourself through the movements that you're doing on the wave, but on dry land, on flat earth, so that when you end up on the wave, your body kind of knows what to do. Those patterns are ingrained. And that's probably the most fitnessy dabbling I'm doing outside of Beyond Macros these days.
Do you, are you still on your streak of surfing? Like, I know there was a while where you had a streak, was it a streak, or was it like I want to do X amount of days out of the year? Yeah,
it was goal was 300 days out of the year, and I did 318 in 21. And ultimately, man, I had a goal the year prior to make sure that I didn't surf, or to make sure that there were less than 100 days that I didn't surf. So my goal was essentially over 265 days in 2020. Okay. So I had kind of 2 years back to back where I was like really consciously making sure and tracking like how much am I surfing. And then now from 2 years of doing that, it's just carried through. Like I don't track anymore, but it feels at this point harder for me not to go surf, even if the waves are bad, than it feels for me to be like, oh, the waves are bad. I'm tired. It's 4 a.m. Like I'm not going to go surf. It's like, that doesn't happen anymore.
Do you feel like surfing is your way, almost like meditation, a way to clear the mind, connect with nature, and just kind of be in more of like a flow state? Does it kind of, and maybe help counteract another part of your personality that's maybe like, let's go, let's get after it? What do you think draws you to surfing?
Yeah, I've always had kind of a natural draw to it. Even when I was a boy, I just didn't really have much opportunity to do it. And then once I moved here to Australia, and I live a couple blocks from the beach, I'm about to move into a house that's even closer to the beach. And it's just so easy and so accessible, and the waves are consistently good. And so, that kind of like childhood draw that I never got to satisfy as a child. It's like now I'm able to satisfy it, and I'm just like, I love this. And yeah, I think for me, like you said, it's like it's every day I get to connect with nature in that way. Yeah. Like I have a relationship with the seabirds around. Like I have a relationship with how everything on the shoreline is shifting over time. It's like there's a real relationship with nature, and it's just this place where, you know, I'm so present. There's definitely a high degree of flow state. And a lot of my best ideas and I'm talking best ideas, not in terms of like, these have given me little incremental leaps forward, but my best ideas in terms of like the home run ideas have almost all come while I'm in the ocean. Mm-hmm. I wrote my entire stand-up comedy set in my head while surfing.
That I was gonna ask you about that. I saw that you decided that you're gonna do some stand-up comedy and take a class or whatever. And I watched the set and it was awesome. What made you, were you like, I just need to get out of my comfort zone, or?
No, my wife, she's been doing Toastmasters, and which is the speaking organization, public speaking organization. And she's been really on that path of public speaking. And she was told that stand-up comedy is the most difficult form of public speaking. And so she found a crew here that does a stand-up comedy class, and she was going to sign up. And I was like, awesome, I'll do it with you. That'll be a great thing to do together. You know, we can both push our comfort zone together, and this will be awesome. And then unfortunately, she ended up winning a local Toastmasters competition, which sent her to the next level. And the next level, that competition was the same weekend as the final gig for the stand-up comedy thing. So she actually couldn't do it. And I was like, I'll still do it. Yeah, I was like, I'll still do it. Yeah, I'm committed. And it was just such a great experience. I actually now set a goal that I want someone to pay me to do stand-up. And my teacher has told me you need like a 10 to 12 minute set. So I'm going to just do open mics, keep writing material, and try to get something tight enough that somebody's like, you know, come to my whatever, you know, my footy club and speak to the, you know, do a set, whatever.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. So we're going to wrap this thing up, and I have some just kind of like random rapid fire stuff, which is just kind of fun. And so, all right, first one, taco, burrito, or quesadilla? You got to choose one. Taco. Right, well,
easy.
Did you spend a lot of time in Austin? Were you in Austin for a while?
I have been to Austin quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay. If you had to eat at one restaurant for the rest of your life, what do you choose? One restaurant.
One restaurant. My goodness.
That's a hard one.
There's a place by us here in the Sunshine Coast called Spirit House. And it is, it used to just be an empty farm paddock. And these people had the vision to create it and turn it into this like beautiful restaurant with like a pond that has fish and water dragons, and it's got like, it's the most beautiful place. They turned it into this tropical oasis, and it's a Thai restaurant done with French cooking methods. It's like
interesting,
unbelievable. Yeah. And between the food and the ambiance, man, I could live at that place.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Anything you've purchased recently for like $100, give or take, or less, that has had a profound impact on your life, or just like extraordinary value for what you paid for it?
Probably my coffee every day. You know, most investment gurus will tell you got to skip your coffee every day. And I'm like, man, that $5 cup of coffee and getting out of my office and into a different environment, the creativity that flows from that, that to me is under $100. That's well worth it. Screw you, Dave Ramsey.
Right. I'm going to get my coffee. Yeah. All right. What cartoon world do you wish you could live in for a week? Cartoon world.
Oh, cartoon world. Oh man, I think. Have you ever seen the anime movie Princess Mononoke?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, yeah. Well,
what is that?
It's a fantastic film, but it's just like, it looks like a really beautiful world. The like nature part of it. There's a nasty part of the world, but the nature part of the world looks awesome.
Okay. All right. I like it. All right. Last one here. If you could have dinner with anyone on the planet, past or present, who do you go and break bread with?
Ooh. Man, I've been really drawn towards the wisdom of elders. Like right now, my life coach is in his 70s. Like I've been really listening to a lot of the older investors and trying to extract knowledge from them. So, man, that's a good question. I'm just thinking about so many old people that I'd love to talk to, or like figures from history at the end of their life.
Right.
Is it enough? Is it enough to say, man, anybody who's lived a storied life, I'd love to talk to them when they're in their 80s. You know, they've had like a serious pass at life. What were you going to say?
We'll go with that. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
I'll let you off the hook with a ambiguous answer.
But elders.
The elders. I like it. Matt, man, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate getting to talk to people that I know, but I don't really know. I haven't been able to like really have deeper conversations and figure out more of their background. So I appreciate you taking an hour out of your day today to come hang out.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure. I'm going to have to figure out how to flip the script because I don't have a podcast in this format.
It's all right. If I bring the family,
I'll buy you a coffee.
All right. It sounds good. And if I bring the family down to the Sunshine Coast, we can have a coffee and go to your favorite restaurant.
Awesome.
So if people want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing, maybe they're a nutrition coach and want to go deeper into what you guys are doing at Beyond Macros from the coaching standpoint, what are some good places for them to just start, finding out about you guys?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, beyondmacros.com, usually, we've got some pretty easy to navigate links there. We've got some of the, it's like you can say, hey, I'm a new coach. I'm a, side hustling coach. I'm an experienced coach. And it kind of points you in the direction of some of the best resources we have there. And we also have our Facebook group, the Online Nutrition Coach Community. So that's a pretty good place to check us out as well.
Okay. And is your Facebook group free? It's just for like anyone that's really interested in nutrition coaching?
Yep. Online Nutrition Coach Community is free.
Nice. Well, we'll put all those links and everything in the show notes. So definitely check that out. Matt, it's been awesome.
Yeah, dude. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hopefully we get to see you in person at some point.
Yeah, soon enough.
All right, brother. We'll see you later.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.